Hey, what's up, guys? So we're getting ready for Snowball. Nothing like last minute preparation.
Very last minute.
We have so much stuff to put on the truck.
Not even funny.
It's insane. However, the most exciting thing, for me at least, is going to be putting on these brand new shocks. So we're going to show you everything really quick, and then I'll walk you through what we're doing on the truck. You're not going to have sound of us doing it because it's cold out, and I'm going to be running a generator and a heater and all this stuff just to keep him from freezing.
Yeah.
He's a lightweight. It's going to be fun to see how you do Snowball.
You said we were working in the garage.
We are in the garage.
Not the door open.
All right, well, anyway, exciting. Here it is. We are going to be putting on brand new JRZ shocks. Boom! I mean, just, no. Here it is. Look at that. Beautiful. All right. Stickers.
Always good.
It's going to make it go faster.
Yep. 10 horsepower each. And there's...
Get that out of here. Oh, look at these. Look at this.
Oh, it's so heavy. It is heavy.
Oh, it's gorgeous, though. Oh, it's like they know I love red. They did it just for me.
I think those are meant to go on my truck, actually.
Okay, so these shocks are super well made. I mean, you can just look at them, look at the design, look at everything that went into them. They're inverted from the way that they traditionally are on our trucks, but that's actually a good thing from what I understand. You don't have like all that salt and crap sitting on here,
That
seeping
makes
in
sense.
During the winter and, you know, water and stuff. So it just drains off. But these are gorgeous, man. I just can't get over it.
They're super nice.
So as gorgeous as these are, I'm gonna ruin them. They're so pretty. Here, hold this. Tim Olson over at JRZ or Olson Motorsports. He has a set of these on his truck, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And I fell in love with him when I rode with him in his truck. His truck handles like a freaking sports car.
It really does.
On-road and off-road. It's insane. And the fact that these are adjustable on the fly, like, not on the fly when you're rolling, because if you're underneath your truck while it's rolling, you're in trouble.
That might be an issue.
But you can stop and just make quick adjustments, and it changes the dampening and the rebound.
Which is down here.
Yeah. Just by these quick little clicks. And getting it dialed in.
That's wild.
For whatever you're doing. So this is like perfect for whether you're running off-road or maybe you're going to be running road and you want it a little stiffer.
Mm-hmm.
Hitting a bunch of whoops, soften it up.
Yep.
I mean, this is awesome that you can just change these. I'm excited. To see how they go.
All right, so we're going to need a few tools to get this done. This should be a list of just about everything that you need. To start off with, you're going to need ratchets for the various size sockets we're going to use for this. You're also going to need jack and jack stands, of course. A lift would be preferred, but it's okay if you don't have one. A tire iron, sledge hammer, pry bar, ratchet strap, flathead screwdriver, knife, and a flashlight. Also, if you have some sort of impact or electric ratchet, that will come in really handy. More specifically, for each step, you're going to need, for the ball joint nut, a 10mm socket and an 18mm wrench. For the lower front shock nut and bolt, you're going to need a 30mm deep socket or a closed-in wrench for the nut, and then a 27mm socket for the bolt. On the front shock upper nut / bolt, you're going to need 18mm and a 15mm wrench, an 18mm and a 15mm deep socket. I'll explain that later. And then a 6-inch or longer ratchet extension and swivel attachment as well. For the rear shock bolts, you're going to need a 15mm socket. For the rear shock nuts, you're going to need a 18mm wrench or deep socket. And of course, most importantly, some good tunes. When I say it was cold out, I mean, it was really cold. It was like 18 degrees. I really owe Colby for all the hard work that he put into this build with me. So right here, we're ratcheting up the lower control arm, just trying to take some pressure off it, support it. We don't want it falling down, pulling on the brake lines or any of that stuff after we start taking this apart. First thing here, we're going to be, well, I guess the second thing now, we're going to be removing the nut off of the ball joint. So if you hold the nut with a wrench, you can put a 10mm socket on the ball joint itself and loosen it that way. Take a little pressure off and the nut comes right off by hand afterwards. So that frees up the spindle. The spindle is what's in his hand right now. Now that you have the spindle freed up, the next move, and I don't know how we missed this on camera, but it's taking the main bolt, the lower bolt out of the shock mount. So at the bottom of the shock, you're going to put a 30mm deep socket or a closed-in box wrench on the nut, and then on the bolt you're going to use a 27mm socket to loosen that up. And yeah, like I said, it was super cold. I apologize, the filming isn't the best on this install. We will do better in the future. But we just want to make sure you get the point. Here we're taking off the upper nuts for the front shocks. Now right now they're nuts. When we put the new shocks in, they're going to be bolts because it's reversed, and you'll see that when we do the install. But you're going to use a 18mm wrench to remove those nuts. The factory shocks have the bolts built into them. The replacement shocks, which are the JRZs, are just the opposite. The bolts get screwed into the shocks, into the top hat. It's good to have an extension here. I'm telling you, these things were the most tedious and aggravating part of this whole installation. We moved the boost tube out of the way using a flathead screwdriver. We probably should have taken the heat shields and the fender wells out as well, but we didn't, and we worked around them, and it probably made it a little bit harder. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch every single bolt coming out. We're going to fast forward through some of this, but this is an up close view of the bucket inside the engine bay, and that's where the nut goes on to the bolt that is on the stock shocks. You got 3 of those on there. You gotta get all 3 of them off, and then it's freed from the top. As you can see, it pays to have a friend with small hands, because my chubby fingers would not fit in there. Alright, so now we've got all the bolts out. I'm cutting zip ties that are holding the live valve wire. I had live valves on my truck before installing the JRZs, and so we have to unplug those in order to get the shocks out. And it's right up on top of the frame horn there, or behind the frame horn a little bit. There's just a little clip there that you unplug, and it's free. Now for the rear shock, it's significantly easier. We don't have those little tedious nuts on the top to pull off. It's just 2 shock bolts, and they're both the same size socket and wrench. For those, you're going to use a 15mm socket on the bolt, and on the nut you're going to use either an 18mm box wrench or deep socket. Take those right off, and you know, I also here I used an electric ratchet. I'll post a link to the one that I'm using here. I got it from Home Depot. It was like 53 bucks or something like that, and I'm telling you, that really made life easier. I'm actually mad at myself for not buying one earlier. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to do a full review on that thing. But yeah, you pull the 2 bolts out, and now all that's left is that wire. Probably should have unplugged the wire first, but I don't know. I didn't do things in order, I guess. Again, small hands. This is my son on the left there, holding the button down while I unplug the wire and then cut it free with a knife again, or scissors, whatever you have handy. And that's it. It's fully disconnected and out of the way. I also need to thank my son. He's clearly a trooper, because it was definitely cold out. This install is insanely easy. As you can see, I'm doing it in the garage on jack stands. If you have a lift, it would make it easier, and but it's a super easy install. So here I've got the old shock out. I'm putting the JRZ shock in the exact same mounting places. It's bolt in. It's plug and play. It's super simple. There's no welding or cutting or anything involved. It fits like it was factory, like it was made with the truck. They're really impressive on the install. So again, it's the same size nut and bolt. It's a 15 millimeter for the bolt and an 18 millimeter for the nut. I recommend getting new hardware whenever you're doing any type of suspension change. I think new hardware is always the way to go. Your old hardware, it's got some wear and tear on it, plus it's been stretched out a little bit over time, so it's not going to hold as tight as it did originally. When you take nuts off of bolts and put them back on, you're putting wear on them, and it's just, for me, for suspension components especially, it's important to put new hardware whenever possible. So I put the top bolt in, put a nut on it, just finger tight. I put the bottom bolt in almost. This part here is kind of helpful, having an extra set of hands, because doing this by yourself it can be a little annoying. Get it lined up. Anything's a hammer if you think it is. Go ahead and hammer it in, and then you're going to put a nut on it. Now, this part here is slightly embarrassing. Okay, not slightly. It's very embarrassing. I had a little bit of difficulty, mechanical difficulty, with the torque wrench. So you'll see here I'm using this electric ratchet. It makes quick work of running a nut onto a bolt, but what's really nice about it is that it's not like an impact where it's got a lot of torque to it. So it just gets it snug and then it stops. From that point, what I was doing was then using a torque wrench to bring it up to the torque specs. By the way, for the rear shock bolts, both the top and the bottom, the torque spec for it is 90 foot-pounds. So it only has to be 90 foot-pounds. Now you see here I have a torque wrench because I want to put 90 foot-pounds on it, and I've got the torque wrench set to 90 foot-pounds. And I crank, and I crank, and it's getting harder. Okay, I'm having to put a little effort in it now. I'm not a small guy. If I have to put effort into something, it means it's pretty tight. So this is where I start to get suspicious. I'm thinking, wow, this is not right. I check it. I'm like, yeah, it's set right. I'm fine. Make sure it's engaged. Yep. Everything looks fine. Maybe I'm just tired from working on the truck all day. Feeling a little weak today. Should have had a V8. I don't know. Yeah, well, you should always trust your gut. And my gut told me I was wrong. Yep. Double check it again. This does not seem right. I know I'm not that weak. I mean, I haven't hit the gym since COVID started, obviously. But, yeah. Okay. Well, it's definitely set right. Let's throw it back on there. Yeah, fatal mistake. Oops. Yep. Just did that. There's my bolt. Or at least part of it. Should we watch it again? Trust your instincts, folks. If it doesn't seem right, stop and evaluate the situation until you're sure it is right. I snapped the bolt. Of course I did not have a spare. Of course it was a Sunday. Of course nowhere was open that had a spare bolt for me. Fortunately, the guys over at Olson Motorsports are angels, and they went into the shop and got a bolt for me to replace it. I had to drive the girlfriend's 4Runner over to the shop to pick it up, and I put that bolt on later, and I did not break it again, even though Olson gave me a couple of spares. But now we're going to tighten up the top one. Again, it's only 90 foot-pounds. If you're having to put a lot of effort into it, check your torque wrench. Something's wrong. These bolts are easily snapped if you really crank on it. So don't do that. Don't be like me. Alright, well, thankfully, Colby was working on the front of the truck, because those bolts for the top hat there, they're only 40 pound-foot. So, yeah, I would have snapped those a lot faster. And yes, I did say bolts. So, on the OEM shocks, you have studs that come out of the top hat that go through the bucket there, and then you put nuts onto those studs to hold it in place. On the JRZs, it's just the opposite. The top hat itself are threaded, and you put the bolts in from above the bucket into the threads of the top hat and tighten them down. Again, only 40 pounds. Now, also the size of the bolts, you're going to need the 15-inch socket and wrench instead of the 18-inch socket and wrench that we needed to take the nuts off, because bolt heads are smaller than nuts. Now we're going to put in the lower bolt. Again, use new hardware whenever you have the chance. This was actually, it was pretty simple. We just had to push down on the control arm a little bit, pull up on it a little bit just to get things aligned, and then you just tap that bolt right on in there. Neither sides of the bolt holes on the lower control arm are threaded, at least not on my 19. So it was very simple to get that on there. Now, I don't know what I was doing here. I thought I was helping. I guess I was more in the way than anything. But again, you're going to want to tighten this down. He's using an adjustable wrench here because once you get it snug, in order to put the torque spec on it, you really don't have to hold that nut anymore. I mean, it pretty much holds itself. Alright, so now we're going to tighten up those top bolts. Remember, we changed from nuts to bolts. We only put them in to hold the shock in place until we got the bottom bolt in and aligned. So now we can tighten up the top one. Like I said, these are the most tedious ones. They were the hardest ones to get to. There's 3 on each shock in the front. So, you know, move around what you have to. We probably could have pulled some more stuff out of the way to make it easier on ourselves, but we didn't. And after you're done, of course, torque everything, make sure everything's to specs, drive it a little while, torque it again, make sure everything is tight. But that's it. It was really pretty simple. It would have gone a lot smoother if it wasn't 18 degrees outside, and if we weren't in such a rush. But it was great. So here, enjoy some footage of us running around at Snowball in the JRZs, and then also I've got another video that really kind of goes into detail on a jump that I did shortly after putting the JRZs on. I hope that helps. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Olson Motorsports. Again, they are a sponsor of the channel, and you know, I approached them to be a sponsor because I experience their product and I really love it. Like, I really do. We're going to do a full review on these shocks really soon and kind of give you our thoughts, the good, the bad, the ugly, as they say. But thanks so much. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments. Please, if you found value in this, throw a like on here, subscribe to the channel. We try to only upload good quality content for you. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys later.